Today we're gabbing with Steph Perlman, the entertainment editor at Betches. Steph is a longtime friend, but first-time guest on the podcast. And she edited a lot of my pieces that I did for Betches at the beginning of the season of Vanderpump Rules, which actually makes her the perfect person to have on to talk about what we're going to talk about today. Steph, I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for doing this. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I mean, we talk about this regularly, so it's fun to do it in a formal setting, but this is
100%.
the best, and I have a lot to say.
Good. Okay, so you know what we're talking about today, and I sent you sort of like an outline of my thoughts so far, but I've had this thing percolating in my head for like the past several months. I think just as we're watching some of these, I think some of the younger shows in particular on Bravo. Um, but I want to know if it resonates at all with you, which is that Scandoval may have just like broken a lot of our brains. Is that like a thought that you've had? Have you noticed anything that sort of like ties up into that?
Yeah, I think every Bravo breakup since Scandoval is hitting different. Like it's just we're searching for things. We're all private investigators now. We want to find juicy details, and sometimes a breakup's just a breakup. But if you look
Yes.
at some of those, I was thinking about like the pre-Scandoval breakups, like Katie and Schwartz, which was like a huge moment, and I don't remember it comparatively to things that are
Right.
happening now. And I think that really speaks to how kind of crazy Scandoval is or
That's a
was.
really good that's a really good way to think about it, is comparing it to what to things that were happening before. And I feel like, I mean, we can get into it, but like now it's like you remember where you were when XYZ happened. Like I remember where I was when I heard about Kyle and Mauricio. I remember where I was when I heard about Lindsay and Carl, obviously with Ariana and Tom. Like you were, it's like there are these like moments, and it's like you feel like you have to be part of it in a way.
I think as a fan of reality TV, it's nice to take a seat and watch all this happen and now have these core memories almost about these people that we kind of consider our friends. But I think a lot of it for these Bravo Lebs comes down to what they saw happen with Scandoval. And it's all kind of working as one. Because,
Right.
like, if I'm a Bravo Leb and I'm getting broken up with or breaking up with somebody, I look at what Ariana's doing and I want deals, I want commercials, I want roles. Like you want to be a part of the conversation. If you're going through heartbreak, like you might as well make money for it. So I see it from that side too.
100%. So it's like, okay, so obviously we don't need to relitigate what Scandoval was, but it was this terrible thing that Sandoval and Rachel did to Ariana. It had this huge cultural moment. It upended her life. But I think that for me, I kind of broke it down into two sort of like long tail consequences that I've sort of seen from it. So the first is sort of what you just started to get into, which is like this scandal revitalized a show that was on the brink of cancellation, right? And then it demonstrated, one, that we like can't fully ever write off a show. Like it's like we could think a show is like having two to three bad seasons, but then something can happen where it could have its best season ever the next season. But then it also showed people within the shows that a moment like this can make you a star. It can save your show. Are you seeing that manifest itself on any other show?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like, yes, with the younger shows, but weirdly, my brain went to Kyle and Morgan's music video. Like,
Oh,
that was a really interesting example because it wasn't this younger generation. I don't know if Kyle did it in mind with housewives, but she did it in mind of herself and her relevancy and the conversation surrounding her divorce that like broke my heart. Like it was a horrible split that not really many people saw coming. So I do think that it's all hinged on that. And then with the younger shows, definitely. I mean,
yeah.
House, I think, is the main example there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like we'll circle back to Kyle and Morgan, because I think that music video is a really good example of somebody sort of leaning into that. But like with Lindsay and Carl, obviously the thing that stands out is like there was literally a moment at the beginning of the season when Lindsay was like, she literally said, "Carl, you're being like Sandoval." And I don't think that comparison was necessarily very apt in the moment. Like I don't think he was being a Sandoval. Like they were kind of, it's apples and oranges in a way. But I think that spoke to the fact that like how much Scandoval was top of mind when they were filming last summer, because that probably happened early mid July, and that's around the time at the beginning of, yeah. but in terms of when Lindsay kind of said that to Carl, so it was still sort of there. The reunion had just aired from Vanderpump Rules, you know? So like I can see why it was even top of mind for somebody like Lindsay, who's, you know, on a similar show.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the Avengers multiverse when that happened. It was like a crazy like Easter egg callback to another thing in the universe. But yeah, I mean, that was intentional, I think. I think it was like, look at this, look at what my partner is doing and comparing it to something that captured the attention of the nation.
Hmm.
Flipped, it's a good line to use, but I agree he wasn't cheating on her with her best friend.
No.
So it's almost become like an adjective and a noun and a verb, like to Scandoval, a Scandoval thing,
Yes.
this that I think every show is trying to use, like you said, to like keep the show going.
It also reminded the viewer in that moment, it was like, oh, they're aware they're filming a show. You know, it sort of broke the fourth wall just for a split second, but it's like, oh, like even when maybe some of the worst fights are happening on a show, or maybe when they are still very much aware most of the time that like there's a camera documenting it. This is gonna air in XYZ months. Like, I don't know. I think it speaks to that as well. And then obviously you don't want this to happen to anybody. Nobody wants this to happen to them in terms of like on a life level, on a relationship level. But if it does, Ariana sort of has this blueprint for everybody now of like, here's how you capitalize on it, and you can capitalize on it in a way that feels earned because something terrible happened to you.
There's almost now, I think you see it with Lindsay and Carl as the prime example of like the I want the audience to side with me. I want the audience to side with me because there's so much value in the audience's side. Like that's what's going to get you on the big podcast. It's what's going to get you the big influencer deals. It's what's going to make you money and keep you on the show as long as you will let them. Like it's
Right.
you get to have the deck in your hands when that's the case.
100%. And then I'm curious what you think about the flip side of it, which is like, I think there were some moments this season when Carl maybe was aware of the cameras in a way that's like, I don't want to be framed as the Sandoval. I don't want that edit. Like, I think you saw it in the last scene of where they break up. It's like he's talking to the producers and he's like, well, this is how it's going to go. You know, it's whatever. And like, I don't know. I think that was part of his mind too. She wanted to be the Ariana in some ways and be the people's princess. But then I think he also didn't want the villain part.
I mean, to that point, it's in that sense, it's a negative in for reality TV. Like that's the negative effect of Scandoval is you see the wheels turning and
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to see the wheels turning. You want to see it happen as it happens. And when you can see the words being chosen very carefully, I think by both of them. And even when Lindsay said she took her camera out to film, like a person's not using that necessarily. I mean, different circumstances, but that would be used great for reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're in genuine danger and it's for your records and you need it, it's all a little bit more calculated. And we have seen that where people self-produce and it doesn't work.
Right.
That's where the flip negative side of Scandoval, where it's not the juicy gossips, it's the contrivedness of it all.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally right. Like it can just it makes it brings an inauthenticity to anything. And in some ways, I guess it also speaks to like how the show is their life and their life is the show, and it's kind of like broken a lot of their brains probably just from that perspective. But like, I did want to get back to Kyle and Mauricio because you brought up the Kyle and Morgan music video, and I agree that this is sort of like that's the biggest moment. I think that breakup is one of the bigger breakups in Bravo history, probably. Like I think it shocked. They were the golden goal. They were the everyone's getting divorced around them, but Kyle and Mauricio, they're sticking it out through cheating rumors, through whatever. Then they separate and they picked cameras back up, which is what they had just done for Vanderpump Rules after Scandoval. There was another figure in the mix. And I feel like part of it was like, and Kyle contributed to this because of the music video, because of the paparazzi photos. People refused to believe that there was nothing nefarious going on. Like there had to be cheating. Kyle and Morgan had to be sleeping together. Kyle had to be like a late in life lesbian. Like that was like what everyone wanted out of this, right? But like it still remains to be seen whether there was actually anything there.
Yeah. I mean, I think she wants us to think that there was something nefarious without coming right out and saying it.
Right.
I mean, I think they're very protective of their girls. And this was a way of kind of not really doing the cheating rumors and not really leaning into the things that we've maybe heard in the past about Mauricio or even what happened earlier seasons that your husband will emotionally satisfy you.
Right.
Like, kind of taking that out, I think, for the sake of their kids and putting it on Kyle and her journey and kind of using these buzzwords that still kept her in the news and doing the music video and doing the Amazon Live
Right.
together. And I think it was a smart move in the reality TV world. But I think it's interesting that it came within the same 6 months as Dorit and PK. And that was a pretty short lived breakup. Like there wasn't as much chatter around that.
There wasn't.
And I think there were a couple of things about is Dorit and Mauricio having an affair?
Yeah.
And that was, I think, an Escandoval effect.
Totally agree. And I also think that like in some ways you can read it again as like Dorit and PK, there have been whispers about their marriage for years and then months, but the timing of it was like as contract negotiations were happening and right after the Kyle Mauricio stuff maybe had died down a little bit, like Buying Beverly Hills had just aired. Like, and I kind of think that again, it's this kind of broken brain thing of like, can Dorit and PK have their Kyle Mauricio moment, who are then sort of having their Scandoval moment? Like, it's all they see
Yeah.
because and Dorit and PK like and this is not a criticism, like they're incredibly like savvy at the game of this. Like I think Dorit's remained on the show more longer than I ever would have thought, you know, because she's been able to maintain interest in herself.
Right.
I think that the way that they announced their breakup was looking for the moment as well.
100% looking for the moment. And it depends on the couple. Like the way that we are now kind of conditioned to ingest a Bravo breakup has changed because our first mind goes to like, well, has there been anything on Dumois? Or like, were there rumblings? And is
Yes.
there anything that isn't on our screen? And I think that's a big post Scandoval thing. Just to switch into kind of the on screen, off screen of it all is really interesting. And part of that social media and just the way we look at things differently now. But it's like the perception of what we're watching on the air and then what's also happening while the cameras are down in real time.
No, it's like it's a combo of I think Dumois is a huge added factor to all of this. I think that didn't exist when Katie and Tom broke up, however many years ago. I also think Dumois paired with TikTok and like the over analyzing of things in some ways, like everything is an Easter egg. It's the Taylor Swift effect. It's like all of that kind of goes together into like you said, we all want to be the investigator. And I think, and I actually wonder because I think what separated the Scandoval thing was like, as we all know, the news came out, but they had finished filming and the show had just premiered, basically. That season had just premiered. So we were also investigators while watching. Like, where were the little clues? Like, there was the buck grab in Mexico and like all those little things that like we all became the sleuths, you know? And I think Dumois adds to that. The TikTokification of everything adds to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can see we like to investigate. Like I think that's one thing we've learned from Scandoval is we like to have like breadcrumbs. Like we want to find those things. And going back to Summer House really quick, like when we see cracks in a relationship, and I think what's happening with Kyle and Amanda feels more than cracks. It feels like things are not great, and we know they're not great. And then you see Amanda and Jesse Solomon like liking each other's TikToks, and people
Right.
have a field day with that instantly. And then they're watching the show and looking for the little looks between them. I've seen compilations of just like Amanda and Jesse hugging, and we're
Oh my
searching
God.
for that. And Amanda felt the need, she did a TikTok about it. So like that was grasping at straws for something to blow up and to discover before
Yeah.
they know.
Completely. So I feel like that gets into the other effect that I want to sort of talk about that I'm seeing sort of the long tail of. It's like when this happened to Ariana, I feel like most of the fan base sort of snapped into defense mode for Ariana. And that's kind of lasted for over a year at this point. It still hasn't let up. Like people are still so, and like rightfully so in terms of defending her. But like there is this like activated mode of like anybody who even dares to like say one word about it. It's like it's so extreme in the defense of people. And I mean, I feel like we saw that a lot with West and Sierra because it was a quick buildup throughout the course of the season of like, okay, we're really rooting for this relationship. They have a really cute dynamic. He's a great addition to the cast, separately from Sierra too, but like together they made this like really great little pairing. On the reunion, obviously he drops the ball. We find out what happens. He acted like a total fuckboy, all these things. And like he did not treat her well. But as Jesse said, he didn't cheat on her. He didn't do anything that's like totally unheard of, I would say, for like any sort of like guy dating in New York. Like it's a very common story that we've all heard before, right? But the way that fans activated and it was one of the biggest 180s I've ever seen, I think, in terms of like going from golden boy to fuck boy to fuck boy. Like I feel like the activation that the fans had around Sierra and defending her was like absolutely an effect of Scandoval.
I 100% agree. I think we got it once we had Scandoval, people are like clamoring for that again. Like I think the fan base likes to get activated. Like we enjoy picking sides. We enjoy standing people and hating people, which is like a horrible thing to say because these aren't characters. These are real
Right.
people. But it's the reality of it. Like we are itching to talk about something in our group text and read more about things and find like something nefarious that Wes did that was really gross and horrible and that we can rally with our pitchforks.
Right.
Scandival thing because like it was the juiciest thing that like happened in my personal life and I'm not in this.
No, literally, yeah.
Like it felt like it happened to all of us. And I think a lot of Bravo people we like to gossip. And
Of
when
course.
it's not directly affecting you, like it's even better.
Yeah.
I think we were itching for that. And I think West, it was an unfortunate timing for him. Because it's heading into summer, because
Mhm.
it was a good season, because the Carl and Lindsay stuff, like as much as we got what we got from the reunion, it was a little bit of a dead horse by the end of the season because we knew the outcome as we were watching it. And I think their relationship kind of stayed. We all knew it wasn't ending in a wedding by the start of the season. And as we watched it unfold, it became obvious why pretty quickly. And all of that kind of fell into place. When we had this open question and we had no idea about West and Sierra, which I do think was a smart move by Bravo,
Completely.
keep that so hidden to up those reunion numbers and make sure we knew like what was going on. That I think it also like a little bit of a perfect storm in terms of going after somebody again.
Right. Right. And I think, yeah. And it was sort of a bait and switch on the audience in some ways because it was like we all loved Wes. And I don't want to say loved in the past tense because it's sort of like he'll come back from this, he'll be fine. I just think that the reaction, I don't know if the punishment fit the crime necessarily completely. Like I think that he deserved criticism. He deserved to be held accountable. There needs to be cracks in armor because you can only stay golden for so long and sort of like untarnished for so long in Bravo. But I just thought it was like, people aren't even cheating and they're still getting treated like they're Sandoval essentially. And like I'm not trying to like stick up for him like justice for West, but it's just sort of like it's interesting that like everything is getting this intense reaction. And like even when nothing, I mean, Kyle and Amanda, obviously there's like so many Dumois things. There's so many like, there's a lot of smoke happening around them and they release a statement to hope to try to quell it. They release it through Betches actually. And even it's almost like with that, the fans are so activated. They're getting like ahead of any sort of potential cheating, breakup, whatever it is, like that they're willing Amanda to basically break up with. Like they're willing Amanda to leave him almost at this point. It's really kind of wild to watch.
It is. And I have 2 points I want to make. One, just about West and Sierra. One more thing there.
Yeah.
Almost interesting, we didn't get that with Austin. And he didn't like do her that much dirtier. He definitely, I mean, I think West and Sierra had much more of a relationship than her and Austin, but her and Austin had something going. And he basically did the same thing without being a newbie, but
Right.
had the same energy and did not have the same like visceral fan reaction.
Right. And I actually think part of that, Steph, is like she went back to him after being treated, or like there was like this like period of like I think like going back, and like there was sort of this weird gray area with them. And this is what I said this on a recent podcast episode, because I was like, when Sierra said on the reunion, if I see change, I would potentially be open to rekindling with West. And I saw the eye rolls. I saw the comments percolating in of like, with the Austin Sierra thing, Sierra got blamed. People put it all on Sierra because she went back to him. You know, it's like there was no, all of a sudden Austin got no blame, but then like that got put on Sierra. But this time, if I think it would go back to Sierra if she took Wes back. But right now it's like we're kind of serving all the smoke for Wes. I don't know, but that's sort of how I think about that.
So the way people are willing Kyle and Amanda in this way and telling her essentially, you need to leave him and you need to do this. And people will rally behind her and people feel like Kyle is so awful. Like that's also an effective Sandoval. Because I think people are kind of like, if Ariana listened to us years ago, she wouldn't have been in that situation.
Yes.
We have these parasocial relationships with all of them, and we want to talk to them like they're our friends. But it's still someone's relationship. Like,
and she doesn't want to hear it. She does not want to hear that from fans. She doesn't. Right.
And I think it's a really interesting post Sandoval thing where, especially with the younger cast and with younger fans, like people where they could be our peers if we were in the same circle, that you want to talk to them that way, and people go and are keyboard warriors and do it in the DMs and do it in the comments. And that's got to be tough for them. And it's got to be a fine line on, are we giving a statement to an outlet? Are we making a public statement on our own Instagrams? Or are we just living our lives and not commenting on it?
I know.
And I don't know what the right decision for any of these people are.
Me neither. I wanted to ask you, Steph, like, again, because Kyle and Amanda's statement was released through the outlet that you work for, like, I read the statement and I was like, okay, they're getting ahead of Andrea's wedding and Amanda not being there, and they're trying to temper down this loud noise that I personally don't really believe there's much validity to a lot of the things floating around there. But a lot of people read that statement and they were like, doth protest too much. Like, if you have to release a statement, you're trying to cover something up. Like, it's kind of a can't win situation for them.
Yeah, they're in an interesting position because I will say, I think this is one of the first reunions where a lot of the concerns of fans weren't addressed, because I don't think a lot of the Kyle and Amanda was talked about enough in the summer.
It wasn't.
Like, he called her a fucking bitch and it wasn't brought up during the reunion. Like,
insane.
That was wild. So to that point, I think a statement's necessary because the conversation didn't die down because we got no answers. So I think, and then she wasn't there, and then you see all these things and she's absent, and their relationship was one of the worst we've seen this season. So it is a double-edged sword because you can't win because you're putting it all out there, but you're entitled to some privacy, but you're on a show. And then when you're supposed to be giving us the inside stuff, you're not asked about it. None of your other friends bring it up because they're an actual group of friends. I will say this
for sure.
Like, Paige speaking on Sierra was like the best monologue I've ever heard. Like, she had her back. They have Amanda's back, even when they're going after her, saying, we want you to be successful on your own. We don't want you in Kyle's shadow. Like, doing things that real girlfriends do. That's not just going to go away during the reunion, so nobody's going to bring it up.
Right.
Their friend and her relationship and her life.
I also think that, like, this is the first year in a while we didn't get Winter House, which I think sometimes provides like a softer landing for Kyle and Amanda, because it's just sort of like they are never really the focus on that show in terms of like their relationship. They have little moments, but like they just kind of like at a house together for 2 weeks, and I think it shows us that like things can be better between them sometimes. Like, it's sort of like a mid-year check-in with them, honestly, but we're not getting that this year. And now I'm thinking about next season, which is going to start filming in like a couple weeks, basically. And I'm like, they're coming in with all this conversation around them. For their sake, they should give us a season of like minimal fighting between them. and we wouldn't get to watch it until next like January, but like they need to have a good season to quiet some of this down for themselves.
Yeah. And I think they go into every season trying to have a quiet season. At least I think Amanda does.
Yeah,
I think Kyle likes to have a little bit of talk around him, whether negative or positive. I think
I think you're right.
that's kind of the way that he operates. Which he's been on the show. He's one of the three that's been on the longest time. So there's something to say for that. But I don't think it's usually Amanda stoking that fire. So I think for the sake of public perception, which going back to all of this, like Scandoval boiled it into our heads is like, you need public perception. Like you
Hmm.
need it for your income and you needed to stay on the show and you needed to have a show. It's very interesting. I don't envy any of them in kind of navigating this in a marriage and in a relationship, especially while they're talking about having kids and like it's really a fine line. So I'm excited for the season of Summer House. I'm also curious to see how much leaks.
I
Like
know.
phones are up. Like people are in the Hamptons. Like they are
Phones are
looking.
up. Yeah. People are going to be at Southampton Social looking for that.
Oh
What's
yeah.
happening at that table? Exactly. I think the public interest has never been higher. And also with Kyle and Amanda, the other thing that's at stake is their business, which is so tied to their relationship, which is so tied to the success of the show and their place on the show. It's all very intermingled with them. And I wanted the other, so I think with Carl and Lindsay, I don't know if like the Scandival effect in terms of the fan reaction is necessarily super applicable there because I feel like it's a little bit more divided in terms of how people are still Team Carl or Team Lindsay. I think it's a little bit, it's not as like we're all on one side of things. I think the people who are defending Lindsay in a really intense way, there's a little bit of that energy, but it's not everybody is doing that. But I do think the other thing that I wanted to ask you about was like I think it also showed itself in the vitriol that was directed towards Sheena and Lala that back half of this past season of Vanderpump Rules, which was like I think two ways about it because in some ways, yeah, they deserve some criticism about how they were carrying themselves and like maybe being inconsistent friends to Ariana, like to her face and like in other scenes, like they were acting differently. But there's this like forgetfulness from some viewers that they're on a show where they have to mix it up and they have to they're all juggling life and show and like there's different standards for those things and I'm not defending them not being the best friends to Ariana but like they were talked about in such an intense way like they were hated so intensely and I'm like again they didn't commit a crime. You know what I mean? Like they're on a reality show where we want bad behavior and we want people to mix it up. So it's like obviously the balance there was off, but I'm curious how you think about that and like I don't know.
I mean, the two of them, are tenured. They are professional reality stars at this point.
Yes.
So they know what they have to do for the sake of their show. I think at the same time, they're professional reality stars and they like attention. And like, if you're a reality star, you want the spotlight on yourself. So I think it's a little bit of a tricky and somewhat toxic combination
Hmm.
of wanting to save the show, wanting to be a good friend in your real life, but also wanting people to talk about you. Because if you're not talked about on these shows,
Hmm.
you're like, it's almost like no press is bad press mentality. And I think Lala specifically is really okay with that. Like they kind of just want a conversation surrounding them so that their podcasts do
Yeah,
well.
stay
Like,
in the headlines basically. Yeah.
yeah, and I think their feelings were authentic and valid, and I think it was a really hard thing to articulate without getting hate from fans.
Hmm.
Because I
Hmm.
think it must be hard to their life blew up just as much and they profited off of it at the start
Totally.
as I think they should have. And I know Sandoval criticized them for that, but
Yeah.
that was
No,
there. So
totally.
I think the way that Vanderpump Rules this season was, they were all kind of floundering a little bit with just the direction they like their own personal character arcs were at stake
Yeah.
and they had to be authentic to themselves, but also make good TV, but also like worry, but not worry about what the public thought. So I thought the season made me sad.
Yeah, it was
Vanderpump as
they
a
were all
whole.
sort of impossible positions that like you really don't envy at all, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I can understand being jealous of Ariana. And I can understand Lala saying she was cheated on and she didn't get all that.
Right.
And it's just different. Like
Just like we said, Katie and Tom didn't get the reaction. Like it kind of happened before this. It's a different environment. And I also don't think the situations were totally the same, but like, you're right. She's right. She didn't get that treatment. And part of the Lala and Sheena stuff, and I guess all of this kind of ties back to like, again, and I don't know if this is like newer viewers of Bravo or just a changing landscape culturally, but like, there's like a moral policing that happens of reality TV too, where it's like, they did this, they should be off the show. They did this, they should be canceled. Like, number one enemy of the group. Whatever, all this, it's like any little thing that's maybe goes against what somebody believes or whatever. But I'm like, we need to remind ourselves that reality TV is based on bad behavior. Reality TV is based on mixing it up. Reality TV is based on cheating and lying and saying things when you're drunk that you wouldn't have normally said. Like, the expectations sometimes don't align with like what makes for a good show, basically, which is I think something that I've also noticed in recent years. I don't know.
I think so. I think that's a huge part of it. And I think the comment section has kind of given people their own grounds to stand on and their own way to put in like, I think this and you're doing this and you're doing that, where we didn't used to have that and we were able to just watch it unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot we almost don't want to watch it unfold. We want to know what's good. We want to skip to the end, know what's going to happen, and then fill in the puzzle pieces as we go. And that, again,
Yeah.
a big effect of Scandoval is that we knew the end before we even got to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we got that with Summer House, and that was the same kind of blueprint of this season of Summer House.
I agree.
Engagement was called off, and we watched it unfold through the season, but it didn't hit the same.
Yeah, I think it hit, but it just hit differently.
Correct.
You know, again,
And
because it wasn't as like, here's the enemy, here's the hero. You know what I mean? It wasn't as much like that.
totally. And I think I actually saw this today. I'm gonna pull it up so I have it exact. I saw
Okay.
on Instagram some Bravo account that was talking about a rumor that Danielle and Carl like had something going on now out of the blue.
Wow.
And the top comment was from Stephen McGee, callback, and it said, LMAO, y'all need to stop this. I would know, ... Interesting comment, but it was really like everybody in the comments is like, this would never happen. This isn't happening. And I thought it was interesting to see Stephen McGee's
No,
name.
yeah, I agree. Well, and him and Danielle have gotten close again in recent years, so he would know.
Right.
But it's like, but even him commenting that, he knows it's going to get picked up. He knows it's going to be sort of part of the conversation. It brings him into the conversation. So that's this whole thing. It's just like,
But
we're willing things to happen. There's no even evidence into that.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no evidence into it, and it just came across my screen like on
Right.
my page, and I was like, we want it.
But you're still thinking about it now, right? Like, you're thinking about it.
Right. And that would be a great season. Like, if that was why they ended their engagement, as a viewer, that's Scandal.
Next question.
Perfect TV.
Right.
You don't want it for the people involved. That's horrible. But people want it. Like, that was just evidence, is like, we want more Scandals.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
we want Mauricio and Dorit to have been having an affair. Like, we're dying for those things.
And that gets into sort of, I think, the last thing I wanted to talk about with you is like, I think Brian Moylan at Vulture was the first one to point out that like a wedding or people are getting together, that does not create the same level of interest. I mean, think about Teresa's wedding in Jersey last year. It was sort of like, yeah, fairy tale moment, amazing, fun TV, but it's not the anticipation. There's not the same level of investment there. And you know, when there's cheating, when there's a breakup, when there's anything along those lines, like now, like that is what I think a lot of fans expect from a quote good season of a show. But now it's like there's this raising of the stakes across the board that it feels like there can't be a cheating scandal or breakup every season of a reality show.
Right.
It's like is it sustainable, I guess is the question.
I think all of these reality TV relationships are such a roller coaster, and we're so much less invested in the highs than we are in the lows. And I think part of it's human nature. I mean, my brain just went to Kim Kardashian and Chris Humphrey's wedding that we
Right.
were like dying to watch because it started with after 58, 56 days, whatever it was, they got
Mm,
divorced. So we wanted to see that. And that was one of those like first things, at least in my memory, that
that's
I
a good
remember.
callback. Yeah.
And watching their wedding and watching how they hated each other.
Knowing how it ended.
And
Right.
we already knew how it ended. And it's just even like Bethany Ever After. Like that was a Bravo show that didn't do great because it was just about her having a happy life. And yeah, stress of wedding planning, but that's not juicy.
No.
When you I think as a viewer, you just want the juice. Like that's kind of
Hmm.
what it comes down to. And I think that's why reality TV is what it is with a happy friend group. And that goes with friendships, not just relationships, but friendship breakups. You want to kind of see them in like
Hmm.
this like gross kind of way, but it's entertaining and it's better than having it in your personal life.
That's probably one of the most key points we've talked about all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know what? I totally agree. Obviously, it's like this none of this is complaining, it's just sort of pointing out like just the effects of all these things. But I guess the counterpoint that I would make to like all of what we discuss is like I think about last season of Miami. There was no cheating scandal. There was no big breakup. It was still an amazing season of Housewives. So it's possible to make a good season of a show. It's just the stakes are higher, you know. And like I think about OC's coming up. It's like the Shannon, John Jansen, Alexis Bellino situation. Like there are elements of what we just talked about in that, right? It's like a big breakup. A third figure comes in, steals the guy. Not there wasn't. I don't think there was overlap, but like there's an element of that there. So, and people are excited for OC. So
Want to see it unfold. And then one more like just flip side in terms of relationships that aren't romantic. You can only do things for so long, which I think we saw a little bit for Carl and Lindsay, but we're seeing with the Gorgas and the Judices. Like
right.
it's at this point, like it's
Mhm.
exhaust like we loved it for a while, but you can't drag something out for so long too. Like there is a fine line between the breakup and the makeup and the roller coaster of this kind of reality TV relationship that we actually like thrive on and give the things to talk about.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And last just pops in my head. I kind of feel like pre this era, the different form of it might have been the friendship breakup. It was like, I mean, there was like Bethany and Carol, it was Bethany and Jill, it was I don't know why does my mind go
And
here?
Kyle,
Brandy and Steph on Dallas. Like there was like these seasons
yeah.
where like the best friends would break up, and that would maybe create the same kind of effect, but to a lesser extent. But I think that was the old kind of version of this, maybe. I don't know.
No, I think that's totally right. Like, goodbye, Kyle. Like, that's burned into
Yes.
our brains for a reason.
Yeah.
And
So
it
true.
still gets brought up. And there was a time when I remember Bethany on a reunion was like, you got to stop asking me about Jill. And their friendship never ended. But that was like, it was heartbreaking for
Yeah.
fans. Same idea. I just think in a post Scandoval world, our
It's
brains
different.
are broken. Like, I do think that's kind of our thesis here
Yeah.
is
Scandival did break our brains.
indeed it did.
Yeah.
And we now view it through a different lens and want things and look for things. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Me neither. Me neither. I just think it's I question the sustainability of it, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's creating good TV, and you know, and if these people want to sign up for these shows year after year, that's their prerogative. So
I agree.
there's a trade-off for them. Well, Steph, this has been so much fun. I'm so glad we did this. Is there anything you want to plug before we sign off?
No, read Betches Entertainment articles, all of our web articles on the lifestyle front. They're hilarious and funny and informative, and you will get a kick out of them.
And you guys just a couple months ago did this amazing package, reality TV textbook, just like some oral histories of things, some amazing explainers. So go check that out too, because that was really well done.
And Gibson's articles.
Well, Steph, we'll talk again soon. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I want to gab.